Thanks, Marie. That's a lovely introduction. I don't think I'm worthy of something that great, so thank you. Look, so I'm not going to necessarily be the advertising guy. In fact, I'm not going to be the advertising guy that talks about the power of the big idea. What I really wanted to do was sort of reflect on our industry's creative culture. And Cairns is basically going to be the context to that. And it's essentially, Cairns, 10 years ago when I first did it, or 2003, whenever that was, it was just advertising agencies, and it's evolved quite a bit. So really just talking about the two different cultures that are coming, and Marie sort of cited it really briefly, which was 10 years ago you wouldn't have got anyone other than an advertising guy sitting on a jury at an advertising festival. Today, or this year, we had two guys actually from Google sitting on juries. And that for me is actually a really interesting sort of evolution in terms of what we sort of look at ourselves as creative people. So that's what I'm going to talk to. So increasingly my role as a creative director is to sort of curate a much sort of broader range of creative talent and basically produce advertising ideas that are sort of fit for modern audiences. And that can be anything from sort of social media work through to mobiles work, through to apps, whatever it may be. It's all evolving, and that's is that enough anymore? What more do we need to get out of advertising? What more do we need to get out of our businesses that are all obviously creative? And I think if you look at advertising and look at any other industry, the biggest change is basically as a result of technology, and it's constantly changing, constantly shifting, and it's really quite difficult to sort of stay involved and informed on the technology aspect. And that change is obviously flowing through to Cairns, albeit slowly. So 10 years ago, I know we all mentioned technology, I think the cyber category, which is an awful name, we'll just call it digital for the purposes of this, that was very much I think about 2 years old, that category, and even then it was still very much advertising. It was basically banner ads. Contrast that to today, where the work is anything but. In fact, it's almost hard to pigeonhole into a series of categories. So I've been going to Cairns for 7 years. Our first trip was 2003. It was all about advertising agencies, then came to clients. And then they started opening it up to clients and getting clients to recognise the power of great ideas, the power of great work, and the media agencies came. But now it's the technology companies, and they're massively represented. So Google, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft, all of them are putting a stake in the ground of creativity. And it's not just there in a passive role. Some of them are talking about creativity, so they go up on stage and do these great talks. Others are actively driving it by actually doing the work. So I was actually blown away, and even though a lot of the work didn't necessarily always turn up, winning awards, it turned up in the short lists, and it was really diverse work. And I'd sort of encourage you all to sort of go away and have a look at the type of work that didn't actually make it through to the awards aspect of it, because it's still great work. It's still really interesting stuff. That's the best way to describe it. And in some cases, these guys, all these big sort of firms, are all obviously working directly with clients as well. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it all opens up, all the different opportunities. You've got Twitter that hired a creative director. Facebook's got a creative director. They actually hired my former boss, who's the chief creative officer of JWT, who's now of Australia, who's now at Facebook. So there's all these different types of things and all these different sort of opportunities opening up. So they're not just competitors. They're basically they're partners in the process. So I'm not sort of saying, God, we're under attack. It's not like that at all. It's actually opening up a much broader creative opportunity. So basically what sort of interests me and my fellow judges, and what we spent a lot of time talking about when we were looking at the work, was this idea of a new creative class that was emerging. And that was sort of a lot of startups, a lot of small nimble agencies, and more importantly, a lot of tech companies. And all these different companies that were sort of setting up, they all exhibit a very different type of creative culture. And that's sort of what I wanted to sort of talk about today. So if you look at the biggest success in Silicon Valley, it's not a social network, it's not a mobile phone, it's not an app, and it's certainly not an individual. What it comes down to really is the success of the culture that allows creativity to thrive in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different forms. It's not a title, it's not a department, it's essentially an attitude. And at the heart of that attitude is essentially entrepreneurship and permission to fail. And that permission to fail permeates through every aspect of their business. So, I think it's worth asking yourself, when was the last time a client actually gave you permission to fail? It doesn't really happen that often. And you've probably heard it before: fail fast, fail often, fail quick. It's a great mantra to live by, but realistically, how many of us can sort of put our hands up and say, Yeah, absolutely. I'll fail on a daily basis. My clients would love me to sort of piss away huge amounts of money and not have any result. But it's interesting. Right? It's an interesting thought. So if you contrast that to the sort of creativity that we've got today, particularly in advertising, we've got a limited belief about who is and isn't creative. And this sort of needs to be overcome. So just so I get a bit of a feel for who's in the room, who's from an advertising sort of company? Okay. Yeah, who's from a design firm? Who's from a digital agency? Okay. Anyone that's like a developer? Tech guys? Oh, fantastic. One guy in the room. That was one hand. No, that's good because that's important. And I think, you know, advertising likes to speak of itself, as do a lot of industries, as sort of a creative industry. We sort of like try to sort of command a huge amount of attention because we are the creative industry. And in that, you know, in the advertising industry, you belong to a structure that's largely unchanged. It's a writer, art director legacy, and the belief that role in the creative process is infallible. Like it hasn't really evolved massively. But the new creative class is one of those. It's far less defined by structures, roles, and responsibilities, and nor does it necessarily have the experience. Like, you know, look at Mark Zuckerberg. I think he was 22, 23 when he did Facebook, and you look at a lot of these startups, even the guys from Google. They were all very, very young. They were all very much students. And this creative class that I'm talking about is sort of more capable of tapping into opportunities as a result of technology-based thinking. You know, they're not sitting there thinking about what does a consumer need. They're actually just actively out there, just trying to build stuff, see if it works, see if it takes on. And that's a very unrestricted process, and that's something that, you know, I think is incredibly liberating. We don't necessarily get to do that very often. We spend a lot of time sort of, you know, articulating what the problem is, working out what the strategy is, and then going into a very sort of staid creative process that sort of feels very long and drawn out. But looking at that creative class and who they are, they're very much developers, they're designers, they're engineers, and they're basically making stuff. And these are the types of people that we sort of need to sort of bring into our creative culture as as an advertising industry. But importantly, none of these guys are necessarily, you know, calling themselves creative. So you said, do you call yourself a creative person? No. Why is that? Out of interest?
I associate creative role with advertising agencies and the design guys. I just turn out stuff.
But do you think, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, and I'm sorry just to sort of open it up and ask you a question. I find it really interesting there's one person in the room. But do you think that do you think that Silicon Valley sort of sits there and refers to itself as a creative industry, or those guys that are coming up with these great ideas that are actually sort of, you know, changing the way we live? Do you think they feel that they're creative?
I'm sure they do. I mean, creativity is creating things, and
Yeah.
building code is being creative.
Totally agree. So, and I think, you know, if you're using that sort of as a context, you go back the past 10 to 15 years, you know, creative culture is absolutely important for all industries and all people. You look at all these platforms that have evolved, so your Facebooks, your Googles, your PayPals, your Twitters, none of that came from an established player. And I think that should probably concern a lot of us. And I know it doesn't necessarily. I think people just go, oh, look, it's evolved and it's emerged, and we should just get onto it now. We should be a part of that. And, you know, that failure for any of that sort of stuff to come out of established businesses comes down to a lack of, basically a lack of creative culture in many ways. And a lot of these organisations basically aren't agile, they don't foster any innovation, and if the innovation was taking place, it was far too narrow-minded. So, you know, think about sort of like a lot of FMCG stuff, it's got a new flavour in it, therefore that's an innovation, you know, that's new news. You know, and if they are sort of innovating, they're usually thinking about protecting their own business, right? So they're only thinking about what they do today as a business, and they're very focused on protecting that. And, you know, classic example is obviously the music industry. You know, it spent a lot of time, and I think there's a story a couple of weeks ago about Sony. Part of the reason why Sony never got the whole digital iPod music playing space was because Sony Music was too interested in protecting its own business, which was selling CDs and retailing. And that's quite hard. So if you look at most businesses generally, doesn't matter who you are, what industry you're in, they're often fast followers, not early adopters. And that's sort of an attitude that I think we all need to sort of, you know, pick up and run with. And the number of small agencies exist now. You've got basically agencies disappearing because they no longer stay relevant. But you've also got a huge breadth of like individuals that are going out and doing their own thing. So things like Kickstarter and stuff like that. You've got small groups that are actually getting the funding that they need to do the things that they really, really want, and they're doing it on the power of an audience. And I find that again incredibly liberating. But I think sometimes we probably put a little bit too much emphasis on what is success. And the advertising industry is all about advertising awards, and they're great and they're absolutely important. In my mind, they're probably more of a personal pursuit than they are necessarily for the benefit of the agency. I think the agency gets benefit in the sense that this person came from this agency and they did this work for this client. That's fantastic. But I think if you were to go away, and I would love someone to crunch the numbers on it. So again, anyone that wants to crunch numbers, if you were to look at the number of people that win awards and how long they then stay at their agency and move on, I think you'd find a very interesting sort of trend. And you got to wonder, is that particularly healthy? But anyway, I digress. So really, what I wanted to do was just sort of like have a bit of a look at what sort of this sort of Silicon Valley culture is about. And it's widely known, and I think you probably heard it millions and millions of times, is that Google employees spend 20% of their time developing opportunities. Have you heard that sort of figure before, that 20% culture? But the flip side of that story is that 20% culture develops 50% of the products that you see today from Google, which I think is really interesting. I don't know what that 50% is. Hopefully it's not just search. But that for me is really interesting. And it's the attitude that it's never done. So Google introduces to this idea of perpetual beta, which is my little tag. Nothing's ever done, nothing's ever complete. And these guys are constantly looking at stuff. If you compare that to most other industries, which is you refine it, then you put it out. And that obviously does need to exist, because let's face it, no one wants to get on a Qantas jet that then falls out of the sky because it wasn't quite complete and the guy was going, that's fine, it's just in beta, it's fine. So, but fundamentally as an attitude, they're all permanently curious people. Like, I spent a lot more time lately trying to work with different people. Part of the reason why I came to these mornings is to sort of understand what inspires these guys. And they've got such weird breadths of like interest. They're out looking at robotics. They're out looking at everything right down to sort of the code behind the phone. A lot of them are actually just straight up hackers. Like, I'm amazed at the number of people that are actually in like really great paying jobs being coders and computer engineers and everything else that have just basically started out as hackers. And they probably had a life of a small time criminal, and now they're coding up some of the stuff that we rely on day to day. Hey, that's all good. So these technology-led businesses and these people, there's all an inherent obsolescence in everything that a tech company does. And when was the last time you saw that sort of obsolescence being done in what you do? We spend a lot of time doing stuff and then sort of going, it's a 6-week campaign, shift it aside. But realistically, if you think about technology and the way we sort of put products on shelves now, do we need to have sort of inherent obsolescence? Are we pushing a little bit too hard? Do we need to have the same brand exist for the next 10 years? Can it not just exist for 2 months and then we just push it away? And I think that's what that sort of the Kickstarter culture is all about. You've got these products that are one-time only products, that did come out and they'll probably sell incredibly well, and then they're probably long and forgotten and the company moves on to something completely different. And I find that very sort of interesting. The other thing that it does is explores opportunities by rewarding a lot of risk taking and recognise that some things can't be quantified. Is anyone familiar with, there's a company called it's an incubator called Y Combinator. Has anyone heard of them? Yeah. So I find them really interesting because on their website they say we don't want to see a business plan, right? We don't want to see a business plan in order to fund your business. All we want is a demo and an interview. I find that absolutely fascinating. And if you think about the businesses that they've then funded, they've got Dropbox, they've got Discuss, they've got a whole series of sort of a lot of the web platforms that we now take for granted today, all came out of that attitude, which was, we'll just give it a shot. And all they ask for it, I think, is between 2 and 10% of the company's share, which is a huge amount of money. And what they give you as seed funding is, on average, between I think $8,000 and $18,000 for 3 months, which is just phenomenal. You turn that $18,000 into some of the valuations that are out there today. And maybe those valuations aren't entirely true. But again, I just find that as a very interesting proposition, where we sort of sit there and, we're probably all guilty of it, sort of sitting there having to beg clients for, a bit of money. And you've got these guys that are sort of sitting in the valley going, here's 18 grand, go come and move your business in here. We'll help you get sort of pitch ready. We'll help you develop your technology. We'll help you take it to market. Really interesting stuff. So again, looking at the ways in which some of this stuff's being bred, and that's obviously one example, is sort of the incubator piece. But you've also got the external collaborations. The Nike Fuel Band is a collaboration between Nike and RGA, and I think it's a really interesting piece of technology. It's a very interesting product. Fundamentally, it's all about data. Does everyone understand how that product works? I might play the case study afterwards then, rather than talk about it now. But you've also got other things like labs. So, a lot of companies now are sort of setting up labs, which are sort of there to sort of, develop different opportunities. Could be just, I'm developing, I'm putting some code out there, so it's open source, whatever it may be. It could be a whole series of experiments. If you look at Xbox Connect, which is that thing that is sold with the Xbox, which tracks your motion and your movement, there was a whole sort of community of people that are out there sort of hacking away at that type of thing. And then Microsoft turned around and opened it up as a piece of open source technology. Essentially, you could build applications off the back of it, and that in turn has actually spawned a whole different way of sort of interacting with interfaces, or out of home advertising, or whatever it may be. Those are all sort of the product of labs. You've got demo days, which I don't know if anyone's ever been to a demo day. It's a bit like a flea market where you basically got a whole bunch of people sort of sitting there demoing their different sort of thoughts and their technologies and whatever it may be. And I find that really liberating. It's a bit like, a folio day where people come in and present your folio and you go, look, that's some great work. But you've got these other guys that are just not quite sure what they want to do with it. They just come in and demonstrate it. And you look at it and you go, I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something really interesting there. I've never seen it before. The other thing that I think there's a lot more of now as well, particularly in these sort of tech companies, we've got these things called hackathons, which is like 48 hours of just fueled activity, just a whole bunch of pizza and Pepsis and whatever it may be, where you sort of sit in a room and just coach it up. Just do stuff, create stuff, and see what you can get to in the next 48 hours. They may give you a brief, they may give you a challenge, or you may just go, you know what, I'm going to show you how we can do something completely different with the platform that we create on a daily basis. I'm going to take the confines of what I do as a person and what little focus that I have during the day. I'm going to go and do something completely different. And it's amazing what you can get out of those types of things. And again, I look at that as a guy in advertising and go, that's incredibly liberating to be able to sort of do that type of work and actually have that flexibility from an employer, but also then an employer that would turn around and go, you know what came out of that hackathon is something we can actually apply back to our business. And then lastly was obviously the incubator projects. Y Combinator is just one, but there's a lot more of that now. I think STW Group, which is the parent company of my agency, has just announced a sort of an incubator project for any staff that have got ideas that they want to take to market, so they'll evaluate it and then help you. That's pretty cool. I don't know how much of that happens in Australia. This is some other examples of incubators as well. So these are obviously companies that absolutely want to be responsible for this sort of new innovation. You've also got brands like Pepsi. So Pepsi have got a movement function called PepsiCo 10, which is basically there to fund startups with a cash incentive. But importantly for Pepsi, what it does is it gives them early access to technology. So you've got that sort of first mover advantage. Again, that's completely unexpected to actually have, a soft drinks company and a foods company acting as an incubator for startups. Microsoft have got the shocking name, the Bincubator, which is basically... Yep, that's the name. But hey, it's there to give sort of financial funding to ideas, but also it gives early access to Microsoft technology. And that's really interesting as well, being able to sort of get into a company the size of Microsoft and actually access some of their stuff that they're working on. I think that's pretty cool. Some of the other things that sort of come out of incubators, Reddit. Does everyone know what Reddit is? Yeah, so that's pretty cool. That came out of Y Combinator. And there's also Bump and Airbnb. I used Airbnb for the first time this year. That is so cool. Again, you just got to ask yourself, why did that not come out of a big media company that typically sells classified advertising? That's what that is. It's just incredibly different thinking. No one's thinking about how can I get classified ads onto a mobile phone. These guys have just gone, here's a different way in which to find stuff. Here's a different way in which to find a place to stay, and maybe it's not about renting, maybe you can just do a swap, stuff like that. So this, I don't know how interesting this is to you, but it's incredibly interesting to me, because it does actually seem rather obvious, but it's something that we as a creative group aren't necessarily doing, I don't think. I think you've got this hub of interesting people doing stuff in Silicon Valley that's a completely different culture, and maybe it's its own little bubble and its own little world. But these are the types of things that I look at and go, do we need to be doing more of that, or am I sort of off on a tangent? So, realistically, how do we get sort of creative and technology to work together? And I don't know has anyone ever heard of the T-based people? You ever heard of that phrase? So basically, the T represents the depth of expertise and the skill that person's got, and then the crossbar is the amount that they're willing to sort of enable to collaborate. And I find that as a quite an interesting proposition, which to sort of evaluate people. So I've actually started to use it when I've been out interviewing people. And part of that is if I look at my day-to-day job, we're still writing ads. That's what we're required to do. But increasingly, we're asked to sort of write stuff that has a much longer piece to it. It's not about 360 communication with the same sort of message appearing everywhere. It's about 365 days of connection. So as a brand, how do you hold that communication piece for a longer period of time? So started hiring people with journalism backgrounds rather than sort of just people that have come from advertising and wanted to be a writer, because journalists actually can create a much stronger conversation in my mind versus some of the guys we've previously had in advertising as writers who essentially write stuff that is really just an advertising message. Then you've also got basically creating a much broader creative environment. So today, if you look at your advertising agency, predominantly most of them sort of go like that, and at the top of that sort of triangle, that pyramid, is a creative director or an executive creative director, and they typically come from an advertising agency background, or they've come from a design background from a design firm or whatever it may be. You look at technology companies, you've got a whole leadership team, right, across a whole bunch of different things. You've got interaction design, you've got people that are head of code and engineering, you've got product guys, you've got a whole bunch of different things. So I wonder sometimes as an industry, how limited are we in our creative process purely because of our structure hasn't actually changed. All we've really done is add a whole series of different people along the bottom to essentially what is a very traditional structure. It still ladders up in the very same way. And I suppose it's not just the advertising industry that's like that. Most industries are actually like that. But again, Silicon Valley doesn't actually have much of that structure. Also, there's the early adoption piece as well. So, increasingly as an agency, we're tasking people with investigating technologies and just sort of different things that they can basically apply to real world problems. And that doesn't always pay off. So there is an element of sort of test and learn there. Sometimes you find something that's absolute usefulness. Other times you find it nothing more than a piece of novelty. And I think there's nothing worse than technology that's been applied in a novel fashion. And there's lots of that. And then lastly, you got people that are absolutely obsessive about detail. Now I know, as creators, we like to say we're all obsessive about detail, but when I say detail, I say it's the process of constant iterations. It's like, what can we do better? While it's out there, are we testing it? Are we observing the way people are using it? And are we really being obsessive about detail beyond our own instincts and beyond what interests ourselves? It's like, how's it actually performing? How are people using it? So to contextualise everything that I'm sort of talking about, and I'm sorry if I'm sort of ranting, I just sort of wanted to share some of the things that we were discussing in the judging room and the types of work that we're seeing. I wanted to share that in the context of the work. And the work that I'm going to show you is the type of stuff that's basically produced or is a product of a very different culture. A lot of it's technology-led thinking. Some of it's incredibly ambitious. Some of it's deceptively simple. And then people go, why did that win? But it's the way the work's spoken about. So they speak about not so much about the big idea, it doesn't really get huge mention. They speak more about it in terms of the experience, the interface. They speak about it as a platform, as code, or even in a process in one example. So two of the examples were basically co-authored with Google directly, and it shows. The other two were basically the product of a business that's restructured its business model every 9 years, and that's RGA as an agency, which I find incredibly interesting. But all of it's really inspirational work. So I'm just going to basically plug it in, press play, and then we'll just jump to Q&A.
Rum's a musical collaboration between Danger Mouse, Daniel Luby, Jack White, and Nora Jones. We were inspired to make an interactive experience for one of the songs called Black, and it's called 3 Dreams of Black.
Chris and I worked together to build this WebGL film where users are able to steer themselves through the entire narrative.
In this project, there's 3 separate dreams, and it's kind of moving through several different storytelling techniques. And what what you have are some 2D graphics, you've got video, you've got 3D graphics, and it's all kind of playing together through WebGL. We wanted to think about an experience that was specifically meant for the web.
Making a music video for the web browser is totally different than making a music video film, of course. Three Dreams of Black is created with code, so most of what you see during the experience is not video, but it's real-time rendering of visual models.
Experiencing and interacting with a truly immersive 3D world is now as simple as firing up a modern browser with WebGL, like Google Chrome. WebGL essentially transforms your browser into an open source video game console. You can use your mouse to change your angle of vision, move and create objects, and a whole lot more. This is very exciting.
The WebGL is just an extension of JavaScript. It runs, in the browser without any plugin whatsoever, and it really lets us create 3D interactive experiences just using HTML and JavaScript. So WebGL is hardware accelerated, meaning that it uses your video card to render all those graphics really, really fast, which wasn't possible before.
So when we were putting Rome together, we stumbled upon some really interesting things. And a lot of those demos are shown on this website, so you can start to see some of the experiments and things that WebGL is capable of. And WebGL is somewhat like JavaScript, where you can just view the source if you're interested in it. And we've also released some of the source code documentation so that you can start to learn how to use WebGL in different ways. I think WebGL represents another step in pushing the web forward. The types of content that you can expect to see on the web looks a lot different than what you've seen in the past. It's not just text and images, but now there's dynamic real-time graphics, there's audio, multimedia, video, and it's all being fused together in one space.
I think WebGL and web technologies like HTML5 will go a long way towards enabling developers to make experiences like Rome happen, and we can't wait to see what they can do with that.
Things have changed. The industry has changed. And as a musician, I often think back to how we used to listen to music back in the day. It's very different.
What's happening, people? My name is Adam Tensta.
I'm a Swedish hip-hop artist. I remember spending hours in line waiting to get my hands on a new single. But now with things like Spotify, YouTube, and Grooveshark, music is accessible anytime and anywhere. And because of that, some of the thrill has been lost. So in an effort to recreate that anticipation and magic of new music, I decided to release my new single, Pass It On, in a totally unique way, with one copy and one copy only. One Copy Song is a Facebook app that allows only one person to listen at a time before it has to be passed on to someone else. Here's how it worked. Listeners went to my Facebook page to sign up to hear it. When they signed up, they automatically got in line to listen. But because only one person could listen at a time, they had to wait their turn. It turned out that thousands of people lined up to hear my new single. Fans could check their position, and if they wanted to get the song sooner, we made it possible to cut the line. Only thing they had to do was spread the word. By tweeting, watching my music videos on YouTube, or listening to one of my songs on Spotify, they bumped up 15 places. So every time someone spread the word, I got more publicity, and they got closer to listening to the song. When it was their turn, they only had 1 hour to listen to the track, and only got to listen to it once before it got passed along. One Copy Song put my name on the map. Debuting my single in one copy caught the attention of people around the world. So far, my song has traveled to over 40 countries, and my Facebook exposure has multiplied by 20 times since its release. This turned out to be a great way to promote my music and myself as an artist. So good that we are now making it available for other musicians to use. And now my song is traveling the world, one play at a time. At this point, the song has been in more countries.
Nike's mission has always been to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. They've done this in the past by making great products and then telling people about them. 7 years ago, with the launch of Nike Plus, they started a journey that has taken them from being a company that makes shoes and apparel to a products and services company. Nike Plus has grown to 6 million active members using it on average 3 times a week. But now it's about to get even bigger. This year, with the launch of Nike Plus Fuel Band, a metric that measures all activity called Nike Fuel, ties all these products and services together into a connected ecosystem. Like calories.
Every day is the core part of the experience.
When you consistently hit your goal, Fuelie helps you celebrate.
The social part is actually what keeps it really sticky. It's kind of that competition that keeps you coming back. Anyone who you're friends with on Facebook will be in your leaderboard.
When you buy a Fuel Band, you automatically become part of the Nike Plus community, which includes Nike Plus running, training, and basketball. Now the Nike Plus platform is set to grow exponentially with more members who are active every day.
And when it came time to launch the product, we came up with one word that summarized it all: counts.
Can you count, suckers?
Everything you do counts. That became the basis for the campaign introducing Nike Fuel to the world. Consumer demand was so high, pre-orders sold out within minutes.
What I hope we can see in metrics is that people have become more active through wearing their Fuel Band. That for me would be the ultimate measure of our success.
Fuel Band is transforming how we measure performance, and it represents a new mission for Nike as an organization, creating products and services that become a part of people's everyday lives, with motivation built in. It's a commitment we've seen evolve over 2 years of collaborating with Nike on the Fuel experience. From the Fuel metric itself, to the mobile and platform integration, to social engagement,
sort of gives you a good summary in terms of the type of sort of creative culture that's obviously been influenced by what's coming out of Silicon Valley in terms of that sort of tech-led thinking. Thank you.